Hey guys, you know your first stop, right? ATL Day Ones. All day, every day, because you want all the good from the ATL sports scene. However, don't stop here. Go to Locked On Sports today for all your national news, any and all of your national news, whether it is football, basketball, baseball, which we're going to get into in a moment. But yeah, definitely if you want the biggest stories, the biggest headlines, and if you want to know reactions from those storylines, check out Locked On Sports today. And listen, you guys love FTC, our For the Culture segment. They got theirs too. It's called Take of the Day. So again, whatever it is that you want to hear about that's on the national scene, check out Locked On Sports today. That's definitely where you're going to get all the tea. Now, if you want all the tea on the Braves or anything Major League Baseball, then you have come to the right place today, because we got our guy who does an amazing postcast for the Braves for the Locked On Sports Atlanta Network. But he doesn't stop there. He also has a From the Diamond podcast that is amazing. And of course, he's with 92.9 The Game. And he is also a guest contributor to our partner, our techno partner, 11 Alive. So for those of you who somehow don't know him in the ATL,
Right.
it's a guy.
Stop playing around. Everybody knows Grant.
Of course they do.
Hey, great to be with you guys.
Yeah, definitely great to have you. So, Grant, I wanted to start off, and it may be something that's not a big deal right now, but of course, we got information earlier today on Liberty Media, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. That way, I don't mess up any aspect of what that announcement was. And you can find that announcement, obviously, on either the Liberty Media site or a number of outlets, right? But essentially, Liberty Media made an announcement today about where the direction that they are going in, right? So essentially, there's going to be a split off. And so, my question to you is this: there are a lot of big decisions that are going to be made as it relates to the Braves organization and players. Grant, does this split off, does this announcement by Liberty Media splitting with the Atlanta Braves organization, and I know you'll get a little bit more into it, but does it impact some of the decisions that Alex Anthopoulos has to make for this team?
Yeah, I think ultimately it will, and it's going to have the kind of impact that I think fans are looking for. And without getting into a lot of financial jargon, of which
Right.
I'm learning as I go as well,
Yeah,
cover
right.
baseball based on what happens on the field, the results of games, and obviously the things that are built into that. But it's just, I think, a good move in terms of giving the club the upward mobility in its payroll and to continue that trajectory, as they've been talking about, of becoming a top 5 payroll in Major League Baseball. I mean, the chairman of Liberty Media said, as part of this today, I saw the quote that we expect to be a top 5 payroll. Well, if you expect to be a top 5 payroll and you're making moves like this, it would seem to me like that is something that can be a reality. As I've talked about on From the Diamond, as I've talked about just about anywhere else I've been on 92.9 The Game, look, it may not happen overnight, but the fact is that the Braves have moved into the top 10 in payroll year over year. This has been a trend that I'm sure fans are noticing. We're seeing all the different long-term contracts that have gone out. Yeah, you can't sign everybody, but by and large, the Braves have been doing things over the past 3 to 4 years that, I don't know, even 5, 7, 8 years ago, you would have never thought that are possible. So I think this is kind of the next step, the next evolution in that.
You know what, Grant? I think, it's, all the conversation has been about whether or not Dansby Swanson is going to be able to, re-sign with his team.
Yeah.
And we all know Alex Anthopoulos that they want to do that. We understand that part of it. But from me, just reading between the tea leaves, I try to do that and try to come up with my thoughts or my gut feeling about whether or not he comes back. The thing that everybody's talking about right now that I got a chance to check out is the fact that Vaughn Grissom is down in New Orleans working with Uncle Ron. I call Ron Washington, the third base coach, so I call him Uncle Ron. So Uncle Ron is saying he's going to get him right and have him ready to play that shortstop position if need be. Do you think that's the backup plan if they aren't able to sign Dansby?
I think right now that is a backup plan, but I also, just knowing from what Vaughn Grissom did coming up, I mean, he gave the Braves a big boost at second base, offensively speaking. He's playing out of position somewhere that he really spent next to no time in his professional or amateur career, and was able to come up and really make a splash at the plate. Now, that started to cool off the final 4 to 5 weeks of his run in the big leagues because, look, it's hard to get there. It's even harder to stay there. And keep in mind that Vaughn Grissom, along with Michael Harris, those were 2 of the 3 youngest players in all of Major League Baseball. So this was something that, I don't know that we expected him to get there and stay there and never have to maybe take a step back after what we saw over the final 4 or 5 weeks. So from the development of the player standpoint, it is nothing but a great thing that he's working with Ron Washington, because defensively speaking, there were some questions about whether or not he would stay at shortstop once he got to the big leagues. Secondly, and I think most importantly, is how do you best develop this player? If offensively he's able to stick and stay at the big leagues, then that answers that question. If he's not, though, I still think some time at AAA, and maybe that could be the place that he would start, next year if they do have a shortstop in place, would be the play that the Braves would make. And that might not be the worst thing for Vaughn, because considering how young he is, that is something that I don't view as a big-time setback for the development of the player long-term as a piece of the Braves' future.
Now, Grant, I'm going to take you back a couple years to one of the Super Bowl halftime shows where literally we had Left Shark kind of doing his own thing out there on the Katy Perry halftime show. And I sometimes feel like left field for the Braves was like Left Shark just kind of doing his own thing. Yeah. So my question is to you, do you feel like that's maybe the biggest offseason need for the Braves, or do you feel like there is a number one priority outside of the obvious, which is to re-sign Dansby?
Yeah, I mean, the shortstop thing is clearly going to grab all the headlines. And I've said, and I'll say it here, I still think that the best for both sides is to continue that partnership between Dansby Swanson and the Braves. I think he is the best fit. Yeah, would you love to go out there and drop down the money to pay a huge contract for a Carlos Correa or Trey Turner? Sure. And could Liberty Media conceivably do that right now? Yes, they can. But they seem to be moving in that direction of being the big spenders, and maybe that deal is in the future somewhere. But, long story short, once you put that aside and you figure out how else can we make this club better, there were two positions in which the Braves were woefully below average. Left field was one of them, and it kind of bled over into their DH production as well. So finding somebody that can maybe play some left field, finding somebody that could be a DH part of the time as well, maybe that's, something that you could have, hopefully a resurgent Eddie Rosario in your plans, because he had a lost season based on the eye surgery, just wasn't a productive player. But the elephant in the room is, what do you do with Marcell Ozuna and the $37 million that you owe him? So I would imagine Alex Anthopoulos will try to be creative, try to move that money if possible. But when you're one of the least productive players numerically, analytically, however else you want to look at it, in all of baseball since the start of the 2021 season, moving Ozuna for anything is going to be pretty difficult. And I would imagine that the Braves would have to end up kicking in some money to try to get rid of that problem and, simply move on, because I feel like it's kind of reached that point, that critical mass where you got to get more productive. This is not a productive player. This deal's not working out. So that, I think, is also kind of baked into trying to make left field and DH better this offseason.
Grant, one of the things that I've always been impressed by Alex Anthopoulos, he always seems to find one of those reclamation project type moves where like a Tyler Massick and guys coming off the street, so to speak, and coming in and just being one of the catalysts for, the Braves being to help them win 5 straight NL East division titles. So do you see him? Do you see a guy that's already been signed potentially being a Tyler Massick type signing, or do you think that Alex Anthopoulos has one up on his sleeve that he may be taking a look at?
Yeah, there are a couple guys that I think are on the roster right now. One of them was signed this winter. One of them was signed last winter. And the one that they already signed that we've seen a little bit of is Kirby Yates, former All-Star closer, a guy that I think really pitching in 2022 was a big check mark in his rehab process. It wasn't, hey, Kirby needs to come back and be the dominant pitcher that he was in 2019 for the Padres, or this is a failed experiment. I think all eyes were really on 2023 for him, and hopefully he can step into that fray and do that and be a valuable high-leverage arm in the bullpen. The one they signed this winter was Nick Anderson, who was with the Tampa Bay Rays. Big-time strikeout stuff, but had to deal with some arm issues. He didn't have Tommy John surgery, but he did have what's called a UCL brace surgery. So they did have to go in and really get everything, I guess, restructured in some way, shape, or form in that elbow and, try to get him back to, where they felt like he could resume his career without having to go the Tommy John route. But he did not throw a pitch in the big leagues last year. However, they do feel like as he comes to spring training that he's going to be ready to contribute in 2023. It's a really low cost, operation. This contract, it's a split contract. If he's in the big leagues, he gets less than $2 million. If he's in the minors, he just gets a couple $100,000, and you've got somebody that could be a key piece of depth. So it's hard to know what kind of player, and really I haven't seen too many players that have come as far as Tyler Massick has from the independents, being out of baseball basically for a period of time, and then being on the mound for some of the biggest outs in the franchise's history. But I think they're always out there, and every once in a while, as long as you're scouting, you're going to come across some players that really surprise you in some really exciting ways, and maybe a couple of bullpen arms will be guys that step in, because it's a really volatile position group. It's kind of like running backs in the NFL. You can make a great plan, And year to year, that plan can change based on injuries and attrition. So they're always looking to restock that bullpen.
Yeah. And we'll put a bow on it, Grant, just like Major League Baseball put a bow on everything last night. Of course, we know Max Fried, second place, but that was still his highest ranking and his highest finish for the Cy Young Award for the National League. So still good stuff. Brian Snicker, third place. Buck Showalter, question mark, but we'll move right along with that one because I really want to. It's like, just sidebar. You look and you say, okay, 10.5 games back, and we catch him.
How? Right.
And exactly.
Yeah.
So how, Sway? And I'm like the fourth one, and he's never like gotten past like, a divisional round. But anyway, what I really wanted to talk about is this, because Jarvis mentioned it on Vaughn Grissom in terms of what Ron Washington is doing to get him to that next level of his skill set. So I want to go back to the exciting day for us, which was the 1-2 punch of Michael Harris, the second, getting the Rookie of the Year, and Spencer Strider right there behind him in second place. Grant, how exciting is it to have those two young key pieces in place doing as much as they did this year as just rookies, but also like kind of where do you see them growing in terms of the 2023 campaign for the Braves?
Yeah, I mean, these guys, as we know, the sky's the limit when you explode onto the scene for a club that was woefully underperforming. And when you look at the time in which the Braves turned everything around, it was late May. And two things happened then. Michael Harris II came up from Double-A. Spencer Strider went from the bullpen into the rotation. And then the Braves rode the best record in baseball from that point on. 113 win pace is what the Braves were on, especially once they started that 14-game winning streak, which really turned the whole year around. But looking at those two guys in particular, for Harris, I just feel like it's just going to be more of the same and more of just the polishing those skills. He's an offensive threat. He's a threat on the bases, and he's a Gold Glove caliber center fielder. Even if he didn't get that nomination this year, he's going to be getting one of those. And Spencer Strider did things historically, strikeout-wise, that very few pitchers in the history of baseball have done. We're talking about Kerry Wood, Doc Gooden, guys like that. And in terms of strikeouts per nine, neither one of those guys could really touch what it was Spencer Strider was doing a year ago. And both those guys got long-term contracts in the midst of these great rookie breakouts as well. So the Braves feel great about their future, and they should feel great about these two, regardless of who took home that trophy. Those are two huge reasons why the Braves were able to track down the Mets, win the NL East, and get back into the postseason in 2022.
Indeed.
Speaking of getting back into things, I think Ronald Acuna has been a guy who's been – depending on who you talk to, you talking about one end of the spectrum, oh, they need to trade him, or the other end of the spectrum, like, oh, he can't do no wrong. And I think that sometimes, at some point, Grant, I feel like we got to come to a medium when it comes to Ronald Acuna. But just kind of, can you just speak to like him coming off that surgery and playing in that first year? And I think that, and what your expectations are for him next season.
My expectation is that Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to get back to doing the Ronald Acuna Jr. things. I mean, this was a challenging year. I was surprised that the power was down the way that it was. I did not expect that. And I know he had to go through a lot of maintenance, a lot of aches and pains that came with that. But this is a kid that's 24 years old. And if you're only viewing it through the scope of, well, what did he do in 2022? And failing to think about what this kid did from the age of 19 through 23 years old, before the knee injury, and just not think about the impact player that this guy is when he's going and when he's right, then I really can't help you with that. But I will give people a little PSA that can be very helpful for just going on about your day is that Twitter ain't real life. And there might be the crazies that you hear from every possible end of the spectrum that have their own theory about how things should or should not be. That's just not how the Braves are viewing Ronald Acuna Jr. There's no interest in trading that guy, nor should there be. If there was, I would be shocked. I'll be happy to come back on the show and try to unpack what exactly would have gone into that. But that's just not how you build a sustainable winter. This guy having a winter in which he can get back to, just a normal non-rehab based schedule and regimen and come back into spring training, hopefully feeling 100% for real, 100% on that knee, will be the best thing for Ronald Acuna and ultimately for the Braves, because he is a much better player overall than he was in 2022. And even at his worst, he's still better than about 3/4 of the league. So it might be worth thinking about that sometimes too.
Absolutely scary, but man, good stuff. And listen, the one place where you can get the truth on Twitter and you can get hashtag facts is if you go to @Grant McAuley. That's where the truth lies all day, every day. So I encourage you guys. He's such a great follow. I feel like every time I either follow him on Twitter, on social media, or I check him out, and I had the good pleasure of actually sitting with him as a guest on 11 Alive Sports Extra a couple of months ago. It is good stuff. And you know what else is good stuff, especially if you're like us and we're kind of trying to come off the low from last night's Hawks game, you might want a Built Bar in your life. And in fact, you might want a cookie dough puff if we're real about this thing, or 2 or 3 if you're still traumatized from last night. And you can go to built.com and order. Make that order today. Why? Because it's good for you. It's good stuff when you think about 100% real chocolate and the fact that that's only 160 grams of fat. So, and it absorbs pretty quickly because then you've got the 15 grams of protein that are helpful for you. So again, if you're in ATL traffic, if you are coming away from a Hawks game like we saw last night, go ahead and get yourself a Built Bar cookie dough puff rather at built.com. Use the locked on code to get 15% off your first order because why not? It's the holidays and you guys can start to stock up and give the gift of Built Bars.